Mr. Jackson, what words for the prosecution today?
Justice. Justice, that's what I want.
Joe Jackson arriving in court for the trial of the man accused of killing his son, Michael. Welcome back to HLN Special Report. I'm Vinnie Politan. Great to have you with us. We're about 35 minutes away from the beginning of today's action inside the court. Closing arguments. This is it. This is the last words that the jury will hear, and then it will be in their hands. You know, 12 people who didn't know Michael Jackson personally, 12 people who didn't know Conrad Murray personally, will go in there and decide exactly what happened and whether or not Conrad Murray is responsible for the death of Michael Jackson. Alan Duke joins us from inside the courthouse. Alan, I want to play for you something that Sherilyn Lee, Jackson's nurse who was a witness in this case, said, and I want to get your take on what she said. Take a listen.
Much better.
I'm really glad to see that.
It was just hard being in a room with, it was like a virus in there.
Yeah, and then all the traffic and everything and rushing through all that mess.
I don't mean that kind of virus.
A virus, huh?
But I won't go any further.
That was Nurse Sherilyn Lee describing the atmosphere inside the courtroom as a virus. Alan Duke, you spent many hours inside that courtroom. For the folks at home, how would you describe it?
I wouldn't say that there's a virus in there. It's actually kind of odd. I mean, this morning I expect we'll see Katherine Jackson on one side of the courtroom and Conrad Murray's mother sitting on the other. In between, we've got all of the lawyers. We've got it's actually, I would say it's actually a very civil atmosphere. I think Sherilyn Lee is a very interesting lady who is in touch with a lot of things perhaps I'm not in touch with. But I wouldn't call it a virus in there.
Randy Jackson arriving, Alan. I see him coming in by himself this morning. Many days he's shown up with Janet Jackson, but Janet doing a rescheduled concert that she had originally postponed because of what was happening in the courtroom. But Janet Jackson will not be there, but there you see Randy entering. Mike Brooks, closing arguments, the anticipation. The other part of all this is when emotions start to run high from family members, from lawyers, and from the Jackson fans and the Conrad Murray supporters, Mike.
You know, Vinny, I tell you, for the 6 people who have gotten in every day from the public, we've heard no outbursts, unlike some other case that we just heard about we had down in Orlando. Everybody has been very, very good, but we've also heard a lot of emotions in the hallway out of the view of the jury. But today, I tell you, it's the last words. For the defense, for the prosecution, it's going to be tense inside that courtroom. But I tell you what, the final word by David Walgren, Vinny, I can't wait to hear what he has to say and what he leaves in the mind of the jury before they go to deliberate. And the instructions before closings, huge. Plays right into David Walgren's hands.
All right, we're just over a half hour away. Don't go anywhere, folks. There you see the Great Seal of the state of California. Everyone waiting for the arrival of the lawyers, the judge, and the jury. There's the scene outside the courthouse this morning. Twice as many folks showing up as normal. Closing arguments less than a half hour away. Welcome back to HLN Special Report. I'm Vinnie Politan. This is it, the attorney's last opportunity to persuade those jurors that Conrad Murray's either a killer or someone who is not responsible for the death of Michael Jackson. Jane Velez Mitchell, host of Issues, joins us from outside the scene at the courthouse. Jane, what's happening?
Well, we are here with the most consistent Dr. Conrad Murray supporter of the trial. She is known as Beatrice. She has been here every single day. And you are a fervent supporter. You have created a new sign. It says, "No drip, you must acquit." I don't know if you can see that, but on one side it says that, and on the other side it says, "Can't trust David Walgren, fabricator. He altered the evidence." These are signs. We want to be fair, so we're presenting both sides. Beatrice, are you concerned as we await the start of closing arguments?
Yes, I'm very concerned, but I do know that over the past 2.5 years, we've had over 19 medical experts who have come to the conclusion that there was a drip. No drip, no conviction. They have arrived at the wrong conclusion. There has never been a drip, there is no evidence of a drip, and now we have a conclusion, and the facts are available to fall today. And Dr. Conrad Murray, he's an innocent man. He's a brilliant cardiologist. He's a good man, and he's my friend.
All right, Beatrice, thank you so much. And I have to say, we really go out of our way to be fair. We get both sides of the story here. So we had Beatrice, and we are being swarmed now by Michael Jackson fans who would like us to just simply talk to them. But we go out of our way to get both sides of the story, and so that's why we have Beatrice on. Back to you, Vinny.
Thanks so much, Jane. Let's go to Judge Alex, the host of the syndicated Judge Alex show. And Judge, that was an interesting sign, I thought. Is this case, could it come down to whether or not this jury believes there was a drip of propofol or an injection that could somehow make the difference between guilty and not guilty?
The reality, Vinny, as you know, is it can come down to anything, as was proven in the Casey Anthony trial.
Don't remind me, Your Honor.
Evidence in the world. Those are fun times for me. You can have all the evidence in the world, and a jury can just fixate on one thing. But, you know, at the end of the day, the propofol is not to put people to sleep. Never been used that way. It's not the standard of care. You can't use it that way and say you're following the proper procedures a doctor would use. Nowhere in the U.S. Only in China did they try it, and that was an experiment with monitoring equipment, none of which the doctor had here, okay? So if he made a propofol available and left the room and Michael Jackson got it and injected himself, he's just at fault. So really, legally, no, the drip is not the end-all, be-all. But could a juror fixate on it? Sure. Just like a juror could fixate on, I think there's something George Anthony was involved in, and that's why I'm going to say not guilty.
Yeah, and I think that's where the defense is going to go, is try to hyper-focus this jury on issues like that. Let me bring in A.J. Hammer. A.J., this is a trial, many different facets to it in terms of the testimony and the evidence. You know, you had experts in science, you had these recordings, you had photographs. For Michael Jackson's family, which parts of this trial, which moments were most difficult for them?
Well, I certainly have to imagine right there in the opening statements by the prosecution when two things happened. We saw a photograph of a deceased Michael Jackson. I think that was shocking, certainly to the family and to everybody watching at the time. To hear the audio tape, though, of Michael Jackson clearly under the influence of an anesthetic pouring his heart out to Dr. Conrad Murray, regardless of what impact it actually had on the trial, on the jury, it certainly had to have had an impact on the family. It had an impact on all of us. We just couldn't even believe that was the voice of Michael Jackson, speaking so purely about what was important to him and how he really wanted this concert tour he was about to embark on become one of the greatest things he has ever done in his life and career. So I certainly think those two elements. I also think actually hearing the tape of Dr. Conrad Murray that was played where he's speaking with the police and really making himself out to be this solicitous doctor who had nothing but the best care of his patient in mind, his patient who was actually his client, Michael Jackson. I think that has to be very frustrating. Also to hear that he said that the family, the children, were being consoled by him in the hospital, something that our own Alan Duke has refuted in his reporting, that the children were not consoled by Dr. Conrad Murray. So I think that was very difficult as well. And then, of course, you had the testimony of Dr. Robert Waldman, who was making Michael Jackson out to be dependent, if not addicted, to Demerol. And again, something the family has been very adamant about, the fact that they don't believe Michael Jackson was addicted to anything. So there have been some really rough spots. And again, I think we're going to have a lot of those revisited in these closing arguments.
I want to bring in Mike Brooks. Mike, I want to read you what Tia tweeted to me. She said, I love Dr. Stephen Schaefer. He's extremely smart, but explains everything so well that we understand. And how much of these closing arguments do you think are going to be focused on the experts who try to recreate what happened inside that room versus the witnesses who actually saw things?
I think the defense is going to use more of the science and try to refute the science, of the Dr. Schaefer versus their expert, Dr. White, who, you know, how did he relate to the jury? I don't know. But I tell you, I thought Dr. Schaefer explained things a little bit better. But you've got the prosecution, Vinnie. They're going to be hammering at those deviations from standard of care. They're going to talk about the women, him on the phone when he should have been tending to his one and only patient that morning, Michael Jackson.
Thanks, Mike. We get ready as the countdown continues here. And folks, we're at the point of this trial now. If you are all interested in seeing this verdict live, you got to follow me on Twitter. Let me tell you why. Because once this jury starts deliberating, you have no idea when they're going to come back. And you might be out of the house. You might be at work. You might be somewhere. If you're following me at Vinnie Politan on Twitter, I will tweet as soon as the jury lets us know that they've reached a verdict. Then you'll have about a half hour to get in front of a television and watch the verdict live right here on HLN. In the meantime, that clock in the bottom corner of your screen, counting down to the most dramatic phase of the Michael Jackson trial. Closing arguments. Be sure to keep it right here on HLN when things get underway. Noon Eastern inside that L.A. courthouse.
Thought the Johnny Dupree for Governor campaign would be celebrating, except for Johnny Dupree.
I got all the naysayers. You can't do it because.
Couldn't win the Mississippi primary because he's a black man in a state stigmatized by racism. Because he didn't have nearly as much money to spend as his white Republican opponent, Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant.
And you can fill in the blanks.
But primary voters made history by making Johnny Dupree the first African-American ever to have a real chance of becoming the governor of Mississippi.
That's awesome, isn't it? Isn't it awesome that we live in a place called America that allows things like that to happen that have never happened before? Isn't that awesome?
But is it realistic in a race where not much distinguishes one candidate from the other? They disagree mostly over how to pay for universal health care and whether voters should show ID at the polls. And those two ideas aren't enough to motivate voters, according to retired political professor Joseph Parker.
Most white voters in Mississippi vote for the white candidate, and most black voters vote for the black candidate.
Parker says to win as governor, Johnny Dupree would have to get all of the black votes and at least a third of the white. He did it in 2001 when he became the first black mayor of Hattiesburg, but can he do it statewide?
If he does, it'll be like Moses rolling back the Red Sea.
I'm here to talk to you about color. Green.
The only color Dupree wants to address is money, something his state, the nation's poorest, desperately needs, something his opponent has a lot of, outspending Dupree 7-1, but Dupree is confident.
I have a 100% chance of not winning if I wasn't in the race. But I got a 50% chance of winning because I'm in the race.
Dupree has proven the polls, the pundits, and the naysayers wrong before. But with this much at stake, can he do it again? Don Lemon, CNN, Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Black in America, the new promised land, Silicon Valley, is brought to you by State Farm. For auto, home, life, and banking, get to a better state.